Year 73 AD, the Roman Empire had almost completely crushed the Great Jewish Rebellion. Jerusalem lay in ruins, its temple destroyed, streets soaked in blood. But there was still one last stronghold, a lonely, isolated place perched on a cliff nobody could climb. Masada. Masada wasn't just a fortress, it was a symbol, a challenge. On top of a rocky plateau with cliffs over 400 meters high on three sides, nearly 1,000 people were hiding. Zealots led by Eleazar ben Yair, a man who'd rather die than see his people kneel before Rome. From afar, Masada looked unbeatable. Its defenders believed the natural walls and isolation would keep them safe, and for a while, it did. But Rome doesn't leave loose ends. The Senate sent a meticulous, methodical man, an enforcer of imperial order, Lucius Flavius Silva, governor of Judea and commander of the Legio Fretensis, one of the empire's most feared units. This was no ordinary legion, it was a force hardened by decades of wars in the East, known for its precision, discipline, and expertise in sieges. These soldiers were used not just to fighting, but also to building camps, towers, ramps, and war machines. Their arsenal included one of the most devastating weapons of the Roman army, the Ballista. The mission was clear. Masada had to fall not just for military reasons, but political ones. Rome couldn't allow a symbol of defiance to survive. So Silva didn't wing it, no way. He made rushed decisions, followed the war manual step by step, and that manual started with an age-old but effective idea: isolate the enemy. Silva arrived with about 15,000 people, soldiers, engineers, and prisoners of war used as labor. Against just over 900 defenders, the difference was overwhelming. But Masada couldn't be taken by brute force. To pull it off, they needed something more powerful than numbers: precise engineering. First, the Romans set up a full ring of surveillance and control. They built 8 camps around the plateau, each carefully placed to block any escape or rescue routes. Then they connected these points with an 11-kilometer-long wall, strengthened by 15 watchtowers. In just 3 weeks, they had turned the desert into a perfect trap. From above, the Celts watched as the trap closed in like a patient snake, but the worst was yet to come. On the west side of the fortress, Silva spotted a natural rise called the White Spur. That's where the Roman engineers started building the thing that would turn Masada into a legend, a massive siege ramp strong enough to hold attack towers and heavy machinery. For days and nights, thousands of men worked under the blazing sun, hauling stones, dirt, and wood. They did it all while under constant enemy fire, shielded by cloaks, mobile shields, and makeshift walls. But they kept pushing forward. It was a massive project, over 60 meters high, 600 meters long, as wide as a modern highway. And all of this was to pave the way for their deadliest machines, the ballistae. These weren't just simple catapults, they were precise, fast, and feared. They used twisted tendon ropes to launch projectiles with devastating force, from stones weighing over 20 kilograms to steel bolts that could pierce through a shield and the person behind it. More than 50 ballistae were set up around the ramp and on the mobile towers. And their mission wasn't just to destroy, it was to break the defenders' spirit. They fired day and night, creating a deafening roar, a deadly rain that let no one behind the walls rest. Masada, the supposedly unbreakable fortress, started to shake, not from a direct assault, but from something more subtle and devastating: the crushing weight of Roman power, stone by stone, blow after blow. The ballista was more than a weapon. It was a statement, a reminder that Rome didn't need heroics to. Winning battles just took calculation, discipline, and a bit of time. As the huge siege ramp neared completion, a new beast appeared at the base. A colossal assault tower built in sections, covered with metal plates and wet hides to withstand fire. According to ancient sources, it stood about 18 meters tall, tall enough to match the walls of Masada. Moving that thing wasn't easy. Hundreds of legionnaires slowly pushed the tower up the ramp, using wooden rollers, ropes, pulleys, and pure brute force. While they worked, the ballistas kept firing, covering their advance with a hail of projectiles aimed at any defender brave enough to peek over the walls. From the upper levels of the tower, the Roman engineers set up scorpions, a lighter version of the ballista, which launched sharp bolts with surgical precision. It was a deadly dance of fire and machinery, where every shot counted. The goal was to keep the defenders crouched down, worn out, and terrified. Down below, at the base of the tower, they were getting ready for the final blow. The battering ram hung from a crossbeam like a pendulum of destruction. Each swing hit the wall with a deep echo that rang out across the whole valley. It was a sound that spelled the inevitable. The Roman engineers weren't just guessing. They listened to every strike, analyzing the sound, waiting for the exact moment the wall would start to give way. A change in the echo, a hollower ring, was the sign that the stone was starting to crack from the inside. Then came one last ram from the battering ram, and part of the western wall collapsed. The breach was open. After years of resistance and months of siege, Masada finally had a way in. But Flavius Silva didn't order an immediate attack. He knew a broken wall could be a deadly trap. He'd seen it before, in Jerusalem, Gamla, Jotapata, fortresses where the defenders used every corner to their advantage. It was an ambush, every street like a trench. That's why he waited, ordered to halt the advance, secure the breach, camp right at the enemy's doorstep, and only attack at dawn, when the sunlight would reveal every corner. During the night, there was silence. You could only hear the creaking of wood, the whisper of the wind, and the crackling of Roman fire. No one knew what they'd find on the other side come morning. And when the light came, the legionaries were the first to move in, forming a testudo, shields up front, and above them, covered like an iron turtle. Then, in neat columns with centurions in charge, they searched every hallway, every building. They found no resistance, just smoke, silence, and something much darker. In the storerooms, the bathrooms, the bedrooms, there were bodies, men, women, children, all lifeless. According to the historian Flavius Josephus, on the last night, the leader of the Zealots, Eleazar ben Jair, gave a desperate speech. He suggested they die free, not as slaves to Rome. They decided to take their own. They spared each other's lives to avoid the shame of defeat. They drew lots. 10 men executed the rest. Then, among themselves, one was chosen to finish the job and take his own life. When the Romans entered, Masada was silent. There was no final battle, no glory, just the echo of a tragic choice. For Rome, it was a victory without a fight. For the world, a symbol of despair and resistance. The capture of Masada was above all a triumph of Roman military engineering. There were no heroic charges or battles. It went on for a long time. There was planning, patience, and relentless use of technology designed not just to break walls, but to break wills. The ballista was at the heart of this strategy. At Masada, its job wasn't just to create openings, but to take control of the defenders' minds. Every projectile that whistled through the air, every stone that smashed against the rock, wore down the defenders' resistance bit by bit. They couldn't sleep, couldn't move, couldn't trust the silence. For weeks, these more than 50 machines scattered around the Roman camp launched a constant assault from every direction. Some were mounted on wheels, others on fixed platforms, from the top of the siege tower, the sides of the ramp, even from farther positions aiming to hit the entrances or distract the defenders. Each ballista was operated by a team of specialists, 2 men to load and adjust the tension, 1 to aim, and another to fire. The firing rate was relentless. Rotating shifts kept the pace going almost non-stop, day and night. What's amazing is that all this happened in one of the harshest places in the Empire, over 400 meters up on rocky ground, with limited water and extreme temperatures. How powerful was the ballista at Masada? So powerful it didn't need to kill to win, just aim, calculate, and wait.